The official announcement about extending paid parental leave to partners for 4 weeks. It'll start stepping out from next year under a re-elected Labor government. We know that it's a really important time for families when they've just had a new baby, and partners do want to be involved in that early part of the process. As a parent who took parental leave myself after the birth of both of my children, I know that this is something that families want to have the flexibility to be able to do. By increasing the entitlement, by adding an additional 4 weeks of paid leave entitlement, we can ensure that families have more choices and more options. It's also important to note that this isn't about splitting an existing entitlement. This is a new entitlement. One of the reasons that we have done that is, of course, there are some partners who wouldn't be eligible for splitting leave because the primary carer wouldn't be eligible for the leave in the first place, and there'll be more of them who'll be eligible through this policy.
Prime Minister, when you look at how many people will take this up?
Yeah, it's about 22,000. We estimate about 22,000. So the way we calculate that out is we've worked out that there will still be some partners who are not in employment. So if they haven't been in employment, they wouldn't be eligible. There will also be some parents who don't have a named partner, and then there will be about a 50% take up amongst the rest.
Prime Minister, why 4 weeks increasing paid parental leave in line with wage inflation or with CPI?
We're not making any announcements around that at this point. We'll continue with the usual practice.
Does that mean $230 million, when you break it down over 4 years, isn't a huge amount of money? Are you really putting enough emphasis on the young parents at this time?
It is a start. Obviously, over time, our track record speaks for itself. We increased paid parental leave to 26 weeks. We introduced the Best Start payment. We're now introducing partner leave entitlement because we acknowledge this is a really challenging time for families when you've got a newborn in the house. It gets emotionally exhausting. So you want that clear air to be able to focus on your babies, but you also need a bit of financial support during that time as well.
In the scheme of things, though, $230 million over 4 years isn't a huge amount of money. What signal are you sending to parents with this?
What I have said is that our commitments in this year's election campaign are going to be relatively modest. We are in an environment where the government's finances over the next 3-year term are likely to be more constrained than they have been in recent times, as we see what's happening with the economy. The tax take that the government brings in is actually likely to go down during that period of time, and so any commitments that we put before the electorate will be affordable.
With this policy, was this your policy you wanted to push through, or is this something you picked up from the previous Prime Minister?
I think people will know from my own past record over the last 6 years how passionate I am about the early years of a child's life. As Minister of Education, I put a lot of focus on early childhood education, and of course I'm a big supporter of paid parental leave. I had the opportunity to take some leave without losing my pay when my kids were first born. Of course I would love more parents to be able to do that, and I want to acknowledge here too the employers who go out of their way to support people where they're able to take paid time off when babies are born. I know a lot of employers do that, though they are not legally obliged to do that, and I want to acknowledge them as well.
When testing this policy, have you taken into account those inflationary increases to paid parental leave?
I'll come back to you on that one.
Had the finances not been so constrained, would you have wanted to go further with this policy?
Oh, of course, we'd always like to do more.
What would you have liked to have done? How much more would you have liked to have done?
I think if you look internationally, New Zealand is catching up with many other countries who have more generous paid parental leave entitlements. There's always more work to be done. This is a very positive step. It starts a new category of paid parental leave, which is paid partners leave. In the future, there'll be choices for a future government to make around whether partner leave increases or whether the parental leave for the primary carer increases. There'll be choices around all of those things, but this is a very good start.
National have said that or Christopher Luxon has said that he is quite in approval of this policy. What's your response to that, and would you like to see bipartisan support on something like paid parental leave and partner leave?
Well, the National Party have opposed almost every extension to paid parental leave since paid parental leave was introduced. In fact, they were opposed to the introduction of paid parental leave. So I think I'm happily take our track record against theirs, but if they're coming on board and saying that they want to support paid parental leave from this point on, that can only be a good sign for parents.
Do you think it's something that should have bipartisan support?
I think supporting young babies when they're first born and their parents is something that all governments should aspire to do.
So you seemed quite relaxed in there. Is this quite nice for you to come to a kindergarten?
One of my favourite things of being Minister of Education was doing things like this. I do less of them now as Prime Minister, but it's always been a real highlight of the job for me.
When you took parental leave, did you give up your salary?
No, I didn't.
Why not?
Because I was still working for part of the time, but I don't give up my salary when I take a holiday.
Do you know what it's like to be on paid parental leave?
I acknowledge it's, like I said, I acknowledge it's difficult for families, and I want families to have more choices.
Why was it so important to bring a phased approach to this?
This is about making sure that the government of the day, the Labour Party in this case, as we put together our manifesto for what we will do if we are the government after the election, is able to afford the commitments that we make. We've been very clear as we go into this campaign that every commitment that we make will be costed out. People will know what the cost of that is, and it will be affordable.
Well, the 4 weeks won't kick in until 2026. Should you win this time, that's when you'll be fighting for another term. Is it basically saying, if you want extensions to paid parental leave, you basically have to wait every 3 years for an election?
No, not at all. But I'm saying that this is certainly the minimum of what we'll be committing to do in the next term of Parliament. But I'm not going beyond that. I'm not committing beyond that at this point.
Just going back to the costings of it, did you or did you not account for increases to paid parental leave when you were costing this policy?
What do you mean?
So every year paid parental leave, the rate increases by
Yes.
the rate of inflation. Did you
Yes.
account for that when you were costing this policy?
Well, no, because that's accounted through a different mechanism. So there is a mechanism in the budget every year for increasing the costs of any inflation-adjusted figures, whether that's benefits, whether it's superannuation, and the Labour Party's fiscal plan, alongside the budget, fully accounts for
But
that.
this is going to be paid at the same rate as paid parental leave, right?
Yes, it will.
So the cost will
So it will be covered by the cost adjustment mechanism, yes.
So you have accounted for those rises in paid parental leave?
It will certainly be accounted in the overall fiscal treatment of this policy, yes. So it will be fully funded for the cost adjustment, as all of Labour's policies, where they have an impact on the cost adjustment mechanism, will be fully costed for that.
To be really clear about this, does the $230 million include increases to paid parental leave over the coming 4 years?
I will come back to you on whether the cost adjustment is included in the 230 or whether it's included in the costings for the cost adjustment mechanism, which is also accounted for in our fiscal plan.
What was in the...
Yeah.
How did you arrive at the 4-week figure? Was it based around what was affordable, or is there any other particular science to it?
It's a starting point. So acknowledging that those first few weeks after a baby comes home from the hospital, or if, in the case of home births, if they're born at home, those first few weeks are the most difficult, often, particularly for new parents, but for all parents, I think. And so it is, if you look at where partners often take leave now, it's often in those first few weeks. Of course, there'll be an opportunity, I'm sure, in the future for future governments to extend this further. I would personally love to see it extended further, but at this point, this is what we can afford to do.
Do you think you need to be more flexible around parental leave? There are so many different arrangements that parents have in 2023 that just didn't exist when this scheme was introduced.
So this offers more flexibility. It offers more options without eroding existing entitlements.
Is it really eroding existing entitlements to have parents decide if they want to spend that time together with their kids?
This gives them the choice to do both.
Can you
Only for
articulate...
a month.
Yeah.
Only for a month. What if they want to spend more time together? What if they have a really high needs child and they want to spend time? Who are you to tell them that they can't?
As I indicated this morning, I'm open to having a conversation about more flexibility in terms of people being able to take leave at the same time. The bill that was put before Parliament was unimplementable.
How? Why was it unimplementable?
We've released the advice on that, and I believe you've had it.
On the future though, so you've mentioned that you're looking at streamlining the legislation. Can you articulate how you're looking at how you could potentially do that?
Well, I think we actually have to go back and look at potentially that this is a piece of law that's had a lot of additions made to it over time. So I think it is probably time to have a look at how the law is structured and how the leave entitlements are structured, not in terms of the leave that people are eligible for, but the way that it is structured within the law.
Yeah, so can you tell us about your thinking? What kind of streamlining would you like to see done in that legislation?
Well, look, I'm open to a conversation about whether people should be able to take some portion of their leave concurrently. But at the moment, the way the bill was presented and the way the law is structured, it simply wouldn't have allowed for that.
What was
Some mums may look at this and say, oh, actually, I would have quite liked to have had another 4 weeks instead of allocating work to the partner. Did you consider that as an option?
We're always, like to extend paid parental leave further. This is a start in terms of partner leave.
What was in the letter that you got?
I haven't actually read it yet. I only just quickly skimmed it, and it's quite a long letter, so I will read it when I get into the car.
What did you think of the book?
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Love it.
Did it take you to realise that you were supposed to put your finger through the pages?
I was supposed to put the finger through the pages. The kids were doing a really good job of that for me, so
Can you spell cat?
yes.
Do you
How do we do it?
CAT.
Do you think New Zealanders consider education, health, welfare, crime and transport to have gone better or worse under Labour?
Look, I'm sure if you've got a poll, I'm sure that you'll have a view on that. Polls are polls.
Would you be surprised that New Zealanders think health has gotten worse under Labour?
We've just been through a global pandemic. There's been a lot of pressure on the health system.
And in terms of what Nicola Willis is saying about the internal division within Labour, is she correct?
No, actually, the only recent example I can think of where a leader has badly embarrassed their finance spokesperson was when Christopher Luxon overruled Nicola Willis on housing.
Can you advise us on what you've been briefed with respect to the corrections dismissal?
I've had a brief update on it. Of course, it's an employment matter, so I understand that there's a process that's being worked through. I understand the Minister was first advised that there was an issue around the 31st of July, and then about a week later was advised that the person had left.
Have you been advised of Ramika's alleged behaviour?
I've been advised that the allegations were to do with inappropriate behaviour.
Right. Have you had specifics on it?
No, I haven't.
Right. So
yeah.
what further action, if any, is required here?
Well, ultimately, because it's an employment matter, that's not something ministers would typically get involved with, and I wouldn't expect ministers to be involved with. The minister was informed under the no surprises policy, but this is ultimately a matter for the chief executive to manage.
Do you think you or the minister need to seek assurances from corrections that this kind of behaviour isn't happening elsewhere?
I'm confident that the minister will have done that.
Willie Jackson says that parties have become a little bit apathetic around getting around the table and discussing campaign safety, for the upcoming campaign. James Shaw's been calling for parties to sit down and talk about this for a while. Do you think that you've been a bit apathetic, and do you have safety concerns for this campaign?
I think all politicians going into the campaign will be mindful of the fact that it's a different campaigning environment to the one that we might have been used to. We have seen more tension in public campaign events, not just on our side of the aisle, but right the way across the political spectrum. I think that's unfortunate. I think, I love the fact that New Zealand is a very open democracy where politicians get out and about and pound the pavements and interact with people without a huge amount of security around them. There is a mechanism through which political parties can discuss these matters. It's called the Parliamentary Service Commission. They have had some discussions. There is a changing nature, there's a changing approach by the Parliamentary Service to the way it supports members of Parliament, recognising that amongst the pool of candidates, members of Parliament will be perhaps a little more susceptible because they're current office holders. And so the Parliamentary Service has changed the way it supports MPs with their security needs.
Minister Davis didn't say this morning that he'd sought any assurances of that nature. Would you want him to from corrections?
I would expect that that's part of the regular work that ministers do with government departments.
Just on a different matter, Shannon Halbert has been making statements regarding the incident with Tim Vandermole. Are you happy with the nature and the detail that he's provided, given that it's before the Privileges Committee?
That's a matter for the Privileges Committee.
Hey, just changing tack a little bit. Sam Uppendale says he's too busy to go to the supermarket. What do you think of that?
That's really a matter for him.
Are you too busy to go to the supermarket?
I was at the supermarket on Saturday.
Should a backbench MP from the National Party be too busy to go to the supermarket?
That's really a question for him.
National spoke about low voting rates of young people when asked about the local government 16-year-old voting bill. What do you think about that?
I think low voting rates amongst younger voters is a worldwide trend, and we see that here in New Zealand, and not just in local elections, but in general elections as well. And so I definitely want to see younger people exercising their democratic right to vote.
Do you think it's inappropriate to bring up, when it comes to people's voting rights, about a low voting percentage of their demographic?
No, I don't think that that's a reason for not allowing them to vote, nor do I think David Seymour's argument that young people shouldn't be allowed to vote because they might vote for something that he disagrees with.
When you increased paid parental leave from 18 to 26 weeks, the advice was that there were 26,000 families that usually take up paid parental, rising up anywhere near 28,000. Are you not expecting as many partners to take this up as primary carers?
No, we are expecting a lower uptake rate amongst the partner leave to the primary carer leave.
Why?
Because that's the current experience. It's also the international experience as well. So we have looked at other countries around the world who have partner leave. It's not uncommon around the world, and we've seen a much lower uptake rate.
But you also said that more people are eligible because the people that aren't entitled to paid parental leave. So does that balance out somewhere? Or?
No, we're still expecting about a 50% uptake amongst those who are eligible. Okay, thanks.
Is it everyone?
I think